Thank you, Hillary. And thank you to BookBar for hosting us. I'm so delighted to be here with Leilani Henry tonight. And thanks to all of you online for attending despite the Zoom fatigue most of us are experiencing. I encourage all of you to do your book buying through BookBar or outside Colorado through your own independent bookstore. They can get you any book you want, and independent bookstores like BookBar are part of the social capital that makes for a thriving culture. Before I go farther, I want to acknowledge that here in Colorado, we live on the traditional homeland of the Ute, Arapaho, and Cheyenne. Let us seek to understand the actions that took these lands from them and seek to understand what it means to be in right relationship with them today and with this land and with all the creatures that inhabit it. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the book and how I came to write it and read a few excerpts so you can get a feel for how the book reads. In summary, The Hoop in the Tree describes the deep structure of psychological and spiritual wholeness and how that deep structure can help us to lead lives of balance and fulfillment. Here are some of the key insights. Each of us has a core of wholeness and health within us. All the great spiritual traditions of the world, as well as modern psychology, point to the same deep structure. This core has two dimensions, both of which are necessary for an individual or a society to be healthy and whole. Understanding and developing these dimensions can help us to become happier in our lives, feel more connected with others, improve relationships between men and women and between people of different spiritual traditions, help us in raising our children, and improve our societies and our relationship with the natural world. And there are methods that anyone can use to help them develop their core of wholeness. I describe one of these methods in the new chapter that I wrote for this new edition. Also in this new edition, I describe two initiations on the hoop dimension, which are currently undervalued in the dominant extractive culture, but which can help us develop our full potential. One of these is essential for children to develop their full creativity, and the other helps us to relate to life with a sense of reverence rather than of dread. I'll say more about these insights in a moment. For me, this book began with wondering who I am and what my purpose is in being alive. From that, I got interested in what makes people tick psychologically. I've read a lot about it. I got a degree in a license in counseling psychology, and for many years I worked as a consultant in a corporation in a field known as organization development, which is applied group psychology. As a system thinker, I've been especially curious about patterns or templates for human behavior. I was inspired by Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, to dig more deeply into mythology. And as part of my own spiritual search, I've explored religious traditions from around the world. Many years ago, I came across something from the Lakota spiritual elder Black Elk. He spoke about a healing vision that he had had when he was a young boy. Then I saw that I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round about beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in a sacred manner the shape of all things in the spirit, and the shape of all shapes as they must live together like one being. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that made one circle, wide as daylight and as starlight. And in the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy. To make a long story short, that image of the hoop and the tree lodged in me like a seed. As I continued my studies, I began to wonder if Black Elk's vision might point to something both fundamental and universal. I found that indeed it did. Imagine a vertical axis running through the center of your being, from deep in the ground up to your highest aspiration or to your image of the divine. Recall a time when you felt especially grounded or rooted. Think of your highest aspiration and what it feels like to be stretching toward that goal. This is the tree which roots you, centers you, and offers you a way to ascend to the light of your highest aspiration and a way to be fruitful. Imagine also the tree encircled by a hoop on a horizontal plane, with the center of the hoop pierced by the trunk of the tree. Remember your family or some other group that encircles you with love. Recall being surrounded by the beauty of nature. The hoop brings you into relationship with the rest of the universe. Together, the hoop and tree image is a pattern or model for wholeness in the universe and in you. In its simplest abstract form, it resembles a gyroscope. A gyroscope is a little hoop spinning on a vertical axle that keeps itself balanced and upright no matter what. You can feel this almost miraculous stability yourself by experimenting with a toy gyroscope. Gyroscopes are so steady, in fact, that advanced gyroscopes have been used as the heart of navigational instruments for aircraft and ships. A hoop of relationship around a vertical growing core of individuality makes this same shape. Our ancestors visualized this shape as a hoop around a tree. And these two dimensions of the soul do form an internal gyrocompass for one's life. Having the hoop and tree developed and in balance can keep you steady, balanced, and on course. The hoop and the tree are metaphors, just as a gyroscope can be a metaphor. They are not things, but together represent a fundamental pattern of energy in the universe. It is impossible to be entirely precise about what each of them means because they are both patterns of infinite subtlety, but it is possible to suggest the realm over which each holds sway. One might summarize by saying that the tree is the autonomous aspect of the whole self and has to do with deepening and ascending for growth, while the hoop is the affiliative aspect and has to do with widening for growth. The vector of the tree is aspirational, and the vector of the hoop is relational. Neither of these two dimensions of wholeness is complete in and of itself. Neither is better than the other. They are different and complementary. Another way to think about this pattern of wholeness is this. When a sculptor creates something out of clay, the sculptor uses an inner framework or skeleton to support the figure. This inner framework is called an armature. The armature is the deep inner structure that keeps the clay figure from collapsing. Similarly, the plastic material, the clay of our human bodies, is supported by a mysterious inner life energy. This energy has been given various names by various traditions. It has been called the soul, the self, Atman, primary point, Adam Kadmon, Buddha nature, and many other names. This armature of being can be well visualized using a mental model which looks like the hoop and the tree. Having this mental model of psychological and spiritual wholeness has been profoundly helpful to many of my readers and clients. This hoop and tree structure appears in religions and spiritual traditions from around the world and across a huge span of time. The oldest or the earliest hoop and tree image I know of appears on a seal from the Indus Valley civilization, and it's over 4,000 years old. Hoop and tree insights from wisdom traditions that I've studied also map to insights from modern psychology. I've found this deep structure of wholeness in Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, modern psychology, at least one African indigenous tradition, many Native American traditions, shamanism, contemporary Wiccan practice, Chinese tradition, and much to my surprise and delight, even in the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to emphasize that many of these wisdom traditions, except for psychology, Buddhism, and Christianity, I approach as an outsider looking in. I don't hold myself out as an expert in the others, and I'm not trying to diminish or simplify their richness or value. What I am trying to do is to appreciate and highlight some commonalities that can help us all discover where we meet in wholeness. So you can always start from your own tradition to develop your own hoop and tree wholeness. Now I'd like to show you just a few images of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to share my screen. And here you see black elk at the center of the world, and you see the tree and the hoop surrounding it. And here on the left, you see an image of the cosmos from Norse mythology, and you see how much it resembles a gyroscope. Here is the image of the sacred fig tree encircled by a hoop of worshipers from the Indus Valley civilization that's over 4,000 years old. Here is an image from Judaism of the tree of life with its hoop-shaped spherot. And there are practices in the Jewish tradition. Hoop practice would be tikkun olam, and the tree practice would be teshuvah. And here in the Christian tradition, we see the cross as a fruitful tree. And notice that there's actually a hoop at the base of this. And some of the hoop and tree teachings from the Christian tradition are love God, that's ascend along the tree axis and connect with the divine, and love your neighbor, or connect through the hoop. In the Islamic tradition, the Sufi dervish dancers put this template into their body as they dance the dance, swirling around, making the hoop and passing energy from above and below along the tree axis. And here in an African tradition, in a trance, the practitioner is ascending the tree axis to get guidance and insight. And we'll bring that back to the hoop of community. And during this practice, they're surrounded by a hoop of dancers. Here in Buddhism, we have the tree of enlightenment and the wheel or hoop of the Dharma, or the teachings. And Buddhist practices would be metta meditation as a hoop practice and insight meditation as a tree practice. Here is the Lakota Sundance Lodge, and it's the hoop around the tree. Here is the Celtic Shaman's Universe, the hoop and the tree. Here is the Tree of Great Peace from the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois tradition. This was a central organizing image in their spiritual practice. And note that there's the hoop mandala of the roots reaching out in all directions. And here is a personal hoop and tree illustration from one of my workshop participants. And there's guidance in the book about how you can make your own. So, as I said, there are all these images from many different traditions, and we can learn from, well, some traditions emphasize Taoism, Wicca, while some traditions like Taoism, Wicca, and many Native American traditions emphasize the hoop, and others like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam emphasize the tree. If you look closely, you will see that most traditions are pointing to wholeness that is hoop and tree together. Now we can learn from the tree traditions how best to develop our tree, and from hoop traditions how best to develop our hoop. The well-developed hoop traditions, especially Taoism and many Native American traditions, all teach that the hoop dimension does not end at the boundaries of the human realm. They teach that a person or a society cannot be healthy or whole without a respectful, reciprocal relationship with the natural world. This means that all psychology is eco-psychology, and that we do a great disservice to ourselves and to our societies when we mistreat the earth and her beings. The hoop and the tree is especially germane now because the current dominant culture has a truncated tree and a diminished hoop. As just one example, it can be said that One of the causes of the opioid epidemic is people's efforts to compensate for a diminished personal hoop. There's a lot more in the book, including a lot of stories about hoop and tree healing. I wish I had time to tell you all of them. For now, I can read you a couple of excerpts. The first is a traditional tree story, and as I describe in the book, one of the cognates or symbolic equivalents of the tree's roots is a well of water. Once, in the time beside time, in the time beyond time, in the time beneath time, there was a young woman, both pretty and industrious, who was mistreated by her stepmother and obliged to sit by a well and spin until her fingers bled. Now it happened that one day the spindle was stained by her blood, and so she dipped the spindle in the well to wash off the mark. But the spindle slipped out of her hand and fell to the bottom of the well. Learning of this, the cruel stepmother told the girl that she had to fetch the spindle out again. In the sorrow of her heart, the girl jumped into the well and soon lost consciousness. When she came to herself again, she was in a lovely meadow. Across this meadow she wandered until she came to a baker's oven full of bread. The bread called to her, "Oh, take me out, or I shall burn. I have been baked a long time." The girl rescued the bread and then went on her way. Next, she came to a tree full of rosy apples. The tree called to her, "Oh, shake me, my apples are all ripe." She shook the tree and gathered the apples into a heap. At last, she came to the dwelling of a fearsome old woman with large teeth. The old woman treated her kindly, though, and the girl entered into the old woman's service. The girl worked faithfully and had a pleasant life for some time. When the moment came for the girl to return to the upper world, the old woman led her there through a doorway that showered the girl with drops of gold like rain. The gold blessed and enriched her return to human life. This Grimm Brothers story of descent is named Mother Holly after the kind old woman at the bottom of the well. Mother Holly, or Mother Hel, was the chthonic or underworld form of the great goddess in Northern Europe. Traditionally, wells were considered water passages to her underground womb. Mother Holly's name is related to the words holy and healing. Here, the descent into the well, like the descent into the roots of the tree, is a descent to wisdom or healing. It says, among other things, that to become a full adult, a girl must descend and honor or serve the deep feminine, who is not always pretty on first meeting. This next story is about how tree work helped one of my counseling clients in the business world. One of my clients came looking for her tree. Jan was a newly promoted supervisor. Though successful in her previous position, in her new position, she found herself feeling overwhelmed and anxious. She doubted her ability to be powerful or fruitful. One might say that Jan's elevation or promotion to a higher level had the inner meaning of calling her to a higher level of development on the tree. In the safe hoop of the counseling relationship, we began to explore her concerns. The exploration led both downward and upward along the tree axis. Jan's associations to her present situation eventually led to her roots, particularly to memories of her father. When Jan was a little girl, her father had been emotionally absent. She had always felt inadequate in his presence. These roots led up to Jan's present-day sense of inadequacy. When she tried to draw on a deep source of strength, she found little to support her. In a healthy tree, the roots nourish, but here the roots were, in effect, sucking vitality out of her present life. Some of her roots were gnawed on or poisoned. Jan's explorations in counseling eventually led also to her aspirations. Hesitatingly at first, she was able to give an image for her ideal. For the present, at least, it was a warm, safe, rustic house in the woods where she could be with her husband and also have time to be with nature and to dance. Here she was reaching the level of the tree where it started to be creative, to bear fruit. As she allowed herself to savor this image, she began to weep with joy and relief. Strengthened by the image of her aspirations, of who she could become, Jan was able to return to the exploration of her roots and to reach, if not peace, at least an emotional truce with her remembered father. After our period of work together, Jan told me that while she still felt challenged by her new position, she was no longer overwhelmed or incapacitated by anxiety. In my work with Jan, I didn't talk with her directly about the tree, but what she did was to develop comfort from a high place and support from a low place. It was her work on the tree axis with roots and aspirations that helped her to heal and develop. Elsewhere in the book, I tell the story of another client whom I call Mark. To summarize briefly, Mark was a brilliant engineer. His expertise was essential for the company's success in a key project, yet he was about to lose his job because he had such poor interpersonal skills. The people who reported to him were rebelling. He also had recently endured a painful divorce and was struggling in his relationship with his college-age son. Though Mark had highly developed tree skills and intelligence, he was failing at relationship. He lacked the hoop. After developing his hoop in our counseling sessions, Mark was able to keep his job. His relationship with his son improved, and at our last session, he told me that he was engaged to be married. In this new edition of the book, you'll also read about people who have used the hoop and tree template in their own work: a college professor, a women's health coach, a management consultant, and several others. And as I mentioned before, you'll also read about one method for developing your own hoop and tree wholeness and about 2 essential hoop initiations. I wish I had time to tell you more, but I hope this gives you a sense of the book. Thank you very much again for being here tonight. And after Leilani reads, if we have time, we'll both be happy to take questions.